Hello and welcome to our video series looking at what is the DCED standard, why should you use it, and how do you use it. This series has three main objectives. Firstly, we want to introduce the DCED standard. What exactly is it? Secondly, we want to provide some advice on how you should use it. When you sit down in the office on Monday morning, what exactly should you do? And thirdly, there's a lot more content, case studies and everything available on the DCED website, so we want to signpost to other free sources of advice and guidance. So here's the contents of the video series, and you can see it's got 9 lectures. We start off with an introduction, what is the DCED standard? And then in the subsequent series, we're going to go into the details of what are the different tools you can use and how do you use them. So let's go straight into our first question. What is the DCED standard? The first thing to say is that it's a framework for results measurement, a way to help you and your program measure the results that you're achieving and use this information for reporting and for program management. It's got 7 parts to the framework, which we'll go through in a subsequent slide. And the DCED standard is a theory-based approach. This means that we start off by looking at what your program is doing, the ways in which you expect to achieve your impact. And it's this articulation of the theory, which we do in a results chain, which informs the rest of the monitoring framework. The DCED standard is an internal framework. It's not designed for use by donors or by evaluators or by external monitoring teams, but it's supposed to be done by internal program staff. We find this is the best way to make sure you learn from the results. And finally, the DCED standard uses a mix of qualitative and quantitative methods. We're not wedded to any single measurement tool. Let's quickly run through the 7 steps in the framework. Firstly is to set out your approach, to say what is the logic of your program. And you do this by articulating a results chain. Next is to measure changes. Here you look at what are the indicators you're using, how do you measure them with good measurement practices, and how do you look at attribution. In other words, how do you say if a change is because of your program or for other reasons? We also look at wider changes, often called systemic changes, beyond the direct beneficiaries of your program. And the last section is to manage your program. You need to track your costs and impact, you need to report them, and make sure that you're using the results for program management. So let's start with the first element of the DCED standard, the results chain. The results chain is a simple diagram. It shows what you are doing, your activities, and how you're expected to reach your impact. The results chain then acts as the visual depiction of the theory of change. And what we're trying to do by depicting a results chain is to avoid the picture you get on the right-hand side of the screen here. And this is something you see a lot. Programs are really clear about their activities, advocacy and training, really clear about their impact, farmer income increase, but it's not clear how one gets to the other. So results chains are supposed to unpick this middle and help to improve the clarity of programs, the design of programs, and set the framework for assessing whether these expected changes are taking place or not. Let's take this example. On the left-hand side, you're advocating to government. But what are you advocating about? Why are you doing it? What changes do you expect from government, and how do these changes increase income of farmers? On the right-hand side, you might be interested in what the incentives are for retailers to give this information, why they give it, what do farmers do with this information, and how does this lead to a benefit? By clarifying these intermediate stages, you end up with a better design program and you set the basis for your monitoring system. Once you've got this results chain in place, you need to measure based on it. And to do this, you need to set an indicator for each box in your results chain. And then you measure the indicators to see whether change is happening as you expected or not. You need to gather qualitative information to understand why the indicators are changing and whether there are any unexpected changes you didn't anticipate. You want to look at the extent to which these changes were due to your program. In other words, build up a plausible story as to how your program contributed to the changes. And you need to look at the wider system or market. In other words, the DCED standard encourages you to look not just at the direct beneficiaries of your program, but the broader impacts this might have had for others in the same market. The next two elements are much easier. You just need to track the costs of your program. This helps to understand the achievements in context. For example, a program which is spending $1 million would be expected to have fewer results than a program spending 100 million. And programs should produce a report, at least annually, which sets out what these results that have been achieved are. What we try to do in the reporting is to avoid something like this, which I'm sure you've seen in different reports, where there's a kind of wild overestimate of what has really been achieved. So the final element is to manage the system for results measurement. And this addresses a common problem in monitoring and evaluation. The information is collected not because it's helpful, but just for its own sake. Instead, an effective program should use monitoring data to adjust their approach as they implement. And this allows information on results to guide your decision making at different levels, from your strategic choices about where to work to implementation methods. And a program using the DCED standard needs a good organizational culture which rewards transparency and honesty in their internal discussions and external reporting. So we'll close by just saying, why use the DCED standard? Firstly, practicality. So it's designed for field implementation. It's not designed by academics or by donors, but it's designed by field staff who understand the constraints you face. Second, quality. It enables you to learn from and use the results based on high quality measurement data. And thirdly, credibility. If you're audited, a process we'll talk about later, you'll be able to produce credible results against common indicators which can be trusted by external parties. The DCED standard is used by programs around the world. We maintain a map on our website of different programs using the standard, so I recommend going and having a look and seeing if there are any programs near yours which are also using it. So that's the end of this lecture. For additional resources, you can check out our one-page introduction to the standard or the reader for results measurement, both of them which will be posted on this page.